Welcome to Flying Upstream, the podcast where we uncover the choices, practices, and wisdom that defy mainstream conventions. I'm Kristyn.
And I'm Luisa. And together we're here to illuminate the alternative paths that have shaped human experiences through the ages. In each episode, we'll examine ways to move beyond societal norms. We're passionate about how timeless wisdom and unique lifestyle choices can foster healthier, sustainable, and enriching lives.
Join us as we navigate, challenge, and celebrate the beauty and insight of walking the road less traveled. If you've ever felt like you're flying north for the winter while everyone else is flying south, you've found your flock. Hey, free spirits, welcome back to another episode. I'm Kristyn.
And I'm Luisa.
And today we're diving into the exciting topic of wild foraging. Now, I realize on the surface it's not that exciting, but I'm going to tell you what is so gosh darn cool about this. Okay. So, wild foraging is the practice of going out into nature, essentially uncultivated grounds or areas, and searching for edible plants like nuts, seeds, mushrooms, things of that nature.
A little bit about the history of it. One of the things that I learned was that about 10,000 BC and onwards, there was an agricultural revolution. And that was what started the domestication of plants and animals back at that time. It looks like that is when the decline in reliance on wild foods began. But foraging continued to be utilized as a supplement. The development of regional cuisines incorporated some wild ingredients, which kept it alive for a little bit longer. But right around the 18th century and onwards, when the rise of the modern food system that we know today occurred, industrialization and globalization led to mass-produced foods, which is what we know today, right? We know supermarkets. We walk into every mile or two, depending on where you live, there's a supermarket. And that is when the decline of foraging knowledge and practices just really occurred.
Now, one could argue this is the oldest survival technique that we as humans have. Even species that predated us did this as much as they could to some degree. So, why today is it frowned upon? Even though there's so many great things about it, like you get to connect with nature, it can be a social event you do with friends, but there's this movement that people frown on it. So we're going to dig into it a little bit more today. So, Luisa, do you have any experience with wild foraging? Have you ever tried it?
I haven't. I never have. And the term is actually new to me as well. So this is a term that I'm learning from you. Yeah, the closest to wild foraging I can relate to is my grandfather back home in Dominican Republic. My family owned a farm. And so we got 99% of our food from my grandfather's farm when I lived in the country, and even the times that I did visit, that's where most of the food came from. So that's as closest to wild foraging as I can relate.
That's great, though. I feel like that is the essence of it, is that you are living off the land in a way that you just go out and you get what you need and you bring it back. And that's the piece that I feel like I've latched on to, is that what you're finding is unprocessed. There's no chemicals or spices or flavoring added to it. You're just finding what you want to eat, you take it, and that's it.
Yeah. And I think there's, aside from the health, the very clear health benefits of that, I think there's beauty in that. I think it speaks to like our human nature. It speaks to the beginning of times and what my children often refer to the ancient times, which is to them anything before 2000. The term wild foraging and the idea of it being this lost art, because I do feel like it is a lost art. I do feel like it does take away from the essence of our humanity. It takes away from the essence and the value that we place on how we get things in general, but especially our food. There's this big disconnect I know you and I have talked about before, where our food comes from. And I think that going out and living off the land, that term, I think that's a big part of it. We've lost that because we get to walk into these fancy supermarkets and hand pick whatever we want, but we have no idea what it took for us to get that. I think that impacts us in so many ways that aren't even discussed. But I guess that's what we're doing today.
Yeah, I completely agree. I feel like getting back to a real connection with nature is so critical, not just because we are from nature, that really is the roots of our humanity, but also because it is so calming and it really helps us restore our mental parts, as my
Yeah.
mother would say. It calms you down, brings you back to yourself, which is so important. There is a little bit of controversy, though, around wild foraging. And part of that is that people find these great places to go foraging. Do they need to disclose this to other people or can they keep it a secret? If they want to continue going back frequently, is there a risk of over harvesting or environmental degradation that goes along with that? We certainly don't want to hurt the environment. That's the whole point of what we're doing. But where is the balance in all this, right? If tomorrow we were not able to get any food from stores ever again, we only could grow it ourselves or find it, that would be pretty catastrophic for the planet, right? Like it would be a huge shift. So where is that balance in there of trying to keep it and pay respect to those who came before us and did that, but also making sure we're not overstepping our bounds? Do we need training programs and certifications? What does that look like?
That's a good point you bring up because it is a real question, a real issue for us where we live in these cities where it's not 10 people, it's 100,000 people to something that, you know, before may not have been experienced by so many people. And I think that there's a question, a big question about where does that balance lie? But unfortunately, I think that we're not even there yet. We have to start with the programs, and you mentioned like programs and certifications and stuff. And I don't know about certifications. I'm not a big fan, says someone who spent most of their adulthood trying to get them. But I do believe that we need to start at least presenting this idea and these concepts so that we can start to create programs. Hey, listeners, we're taking a quick break to talk about something delicious and close to our hearts. Kristyn, you've got something exciting to share, right?
Absolutely, Luisa. When I went vegan, I found that having some go-to recipes really made the transition easier. That's why I've created a place to help everyone go from vegan curious to vegan confident.
That sounds so amazing. So, where can our listeners find these resources?
They can visit my website, KristynMedeiros.com. I've packed it with all the tips and tricks that helped me change my lifestyle so that you can make your vegan journey smooth and enjoyable.
And there's more, right? I heard you're offering something special for our podcast listeners.
Yes, just for our listeners. Head on over to KristynMedeiros.com right now to start your path to becoming vegan confident. Get my favorite recipes that I really used when I was transitioning to veganism. It's all on my website.
That is awesome. Do not wait, folks. Visit KristynMedeiros.com today and take the first step towards a healthier, compassionate lifestyle. Kristyn, thanks for sharing this great resource.
Thank you, Luisa. I'm so excited to see how everyone's journey unfolds. Remember, being vegan isn't just good for you, it's good for the planet too.
And the thing that comes to mind is I remember one of my classmates from high school, actually the only one who went to Harvard from my whole graduating class. One of the things that he's developed is he lives in New York City, and you might actually have seen this, Kristyn, is like creating greenhouses at the top of the building. And I think that's a great place for us to start so that we can deal with that because it will become an issue once we ideally make that shift. How I think starting there may help us find the answer to how we manage that, because what do we do in cities where there are 5 million people?
I like your point about having buildings that have some type of homegrown food available for people in that building. I think one of the big concerns with wild foraging is that the land can be overused, right? And then it's having the opposite effect of what we want. Instead of working with the environment, we're ruining it actually. So if each building or each neighborhood, let's say if you're not in a city, had some type of community garden with edible plants or certain foraging areas that are designated for public use, that would certainly help a lot with that. Just being able to have people give some oversight to it. It almost makes me think of public parks, right? Where everybody's free to use the park, but there is a a governing body of that city or town that makes sure that the grass is there for people to use. And if the grass gets brown and yucky or too muddy, they rope off that area and let it grow back. And then they make it open to the public again. And I think it's the kind of the same thing with the wild foraging. There's really no true governing body to help with that. And now while we're talking about it, one-off people going, maybe a group of friends going off and finding stuff, there actually are companies that do commercial foraging. It's already happening on a larger scale right now. And so these companies that do commercial foraging do it because there's huge profit to it. It is popular and trendy now to eat healthier, and depending on your definition of healthy, that can be these edible plants that are natural and come right from the forests or lands that are uncultivated. So there's a lot of money in it. But as soon as we make it a commercial event or activity, now the game changes quite a bit. It's not just that group of friends going on a Sunday afternoon. It's thousands of people ascending into the forest at once, picking every single berry, every single nut. Now there's nothing left for the animals to eat. There's no more seeds that are falling to grow new plants to replace the old plants that are dying naturally. So it actually does have a bigger impact on the environment when we look at it at scale.
Yeah, and I think we need to prevent that. I don't mean to get political here, but completely against the commercialization of wild foraging. Okay, because we see what happens anytime that we do allow these big companies to produce something that is supposed to be of benefit to us. We lose control. It makes me think of the organic. Like when I buy organic, I don't know if it's actually organic anymore because the definition of organic allowed by the government is not actually what true organic is, what true organic food is. And when I think about wild foraging, I think that unfortunately that's what it would become. They would add their own spin to it in a way that would just negatively impact us and impact the animals that are currently so happily and with so much freedom able to access these foods that, yes, it's wonderful because it's there for us too, but we're meant to share it. But that will be lost. I just, no, I'm going to say that just flat out. And so I think that you and I just came up with the solution just on this podcast episode. We mentioned the greenhouses on buildings and the idea of them as common as parks and having one in every neighborhood where perhaps the neighborhood is responsible, or we add another staff member to the city officials that we're already overpaying to take care of it. I do think that between that and greenhouses, I think that balance, I think it's an amazing solution because it does allow us to enjoy the art of wild foraging without it negatively impacting our ecosystem, our environments, and the quality of life that those animals that do eat off of that land and live on that land get to enjoy right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And I know that we both have children, and I think that's where it starts, is bringing in our children, teaching them what it's all about, the benefits of it, but also ensuring they know the concerns and the need for safety measures as well, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
obviously be careful what you're eating. Don't eat just anything on the ground. Know what plants are actually edible and which ones are not, where it's safe to go. In a forest, for example, some places may not be safe. Making sure all of these things are taken into consideration. And the best way to do that is taking your children out and actually doing it. The huge benefits of wild foraging are getting back to nature, getting back to our roots, and just being able to eat food that is natural and unprocessed. That's really where it all comes from. It has really good intentions. And I think we just need to make sure that the impact we have along the way is matching those good intentions and we're not doing harm rather than good.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. The access to that nutrient-rich food, that wild plants, the organic food that most of us don't actually get to experience anymore. And even from a health perspective, also just the act, the physical act, the activity of going into the forest and creating that connection with nature, which is so important, right? The mental benefits that come along with that and that shared experience that you get to have with your children and whoever else you experience that with, that sense of being able to build community, whether it's at the local spot that we just created on the top of the building or out in the forest. I think that there are such beautiful experiences to have in community. And also the learning experience. You mentioned the safety components of it. And I think that along with that comes the importance to teach our children at a young age. By the time they're able to go out and do it on their own, they understand the difference of the lookalike plants, what's healthy, what's not, like what plants I can eat, what I can't eat. And because I can tell you for myself, I have no idea at all, like in the slightest. There's probably 5 that maybe 10 that I could identify. And that doesn't serve me at all because what that does is it makes me feel uncomfortable when I think about wild foraging. I'm excited now. I feel like I'm going to seek out people to take me out and do this and have this experience because it sounds so exciting. But I'm going to be counting on other people. Aside from the little bit of reading and a little bit of research that I may do before I go have this experience, we can make that easier for our children by starting at a younger age so that they have the knowledge, the awareness that they're going to need to have those safe foraging practices and to be able to understand local areas and local regulations and not get into trouble just by trying to pursue something that is of so many benefits to them, health, physical, mental, emotional, beneficial to our community, but give them those tools from an early age to be able to embark on that experience and be able to share that with other people as well.
I couldn't agree more. I feel like that's one of the best gifts that we can give to ourselves,
Yeah.
our loved ones, and our children. All right, free spirits, that's all the time we have for today on Flying Upstream.
We hope this episode sparked your curiosity and ignited a desire to explore the extraordinary paths less traveled.
Even when the current feels strong, a whole world of possibilities awaits.
We'll see you next time on the other side of mainstream.
So keep questioning, keep challenging, and most importantly, keep flying upstream.